For those who don't know me, my name is Roy. I'm a WordPress developer by day, for the most part, JavaScript front end, more Angular by night, and I work at the Walt Disney Company. I'll leave it at that. Hey, Zachary, why don't you go next?
Great. So my name's Zach. I work for Career Builder. I'm a software architect over there, leading their Angular transformation stuff. They're going from old school jQuery.net to Angular, so that's pretty fun. Also the main organizer for NGATL. I'm kind of trying to hope that we can get something going with the CMS, because there's a lot of needs inside Career Builder that I see, also in the enterprise community as a whole. So I'm kind of trying to push this direction a little bit and also see how far we can push Angular, because I think the technology is incredibly powerful, but I think if we can expose some good opportunities by trying to leverage it with the CMS.
Awesome. Bimo, why don't you go up next?
My name's Bimo. It's short for Ben Moore, and I'm a business intelligence developer at WP Engine. I've been building out a framework that can marry the WordPress and its new REST API with AngularJS. So it's almost a full MVC platform without having to separate and host the front and the back at two different sites.
Awesome. Brian, why don't you go next?
My name is Brian Martin. Brian or Bram?
Brian.
Brian. All right. My name is Brian Martin, and I'm a lead developer for MBA.com. I am the MBA dude from the NGConf keynote, so kind of a big deal. We've been really interested in especially decoupling the administrative admin area in our Drupal instance, and maybe looking at different technologies, maybe even different forks of Drupal to help spur that forward, and mainly looking at Angular as a way to help make that editorial interface even more dynamic and fluid. So that's kind of why I'm here today, and that's about it for me.
Awesome. Now, Graham.
Thank you very much. So
sounds the same. Totally get it.
Yeah, it's Brian Graham. So I'm on the internet mostly known as B-Man, which is better to pronounce anyway. So I'm a freelance software engineer. I'm doing full stack JavaScript for about 3 years. Been working on a startup. We've been working with Angular and loop back as a backend. And I created a system, Colmena, which is it's a platform for building. At this moment, it's more like CMS. It should be a platform for building APIs, like backend as a service. That's why I'm on this call, and doing instructions for Egghead as well. I'm working on a packed publishing course. So, but I'm here today for Angular.
Awesome. It looks like we have one more person on the call, but he's not here right now. So if he joins, I'm happy to do the intro for him. Zach, I'm going to kind of let you lead because it was your idea. So why don't you kind of just run through where you want to start, and let's just have a conversation, I guess.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I'm happy. It's always good to have. I'm trying to prove out, I don't know how much you guys know about the existing CMSs out there that are using Angular. At Career Builder in particular, we're using one called Pencil Blue, which is an Angular 1.5 CMS right now. And we're using it to power some of our niche sites. And they're basically little multi-tenant sites that we have that are around different niche industries. And I'm trying to find a way to migrate that to something a little bit more powerful, and at the same time something that's Angular 4 and hopefully much more performant. And so that's why I started looking at that. And then also at the same time, I started this NGATL stuff. So I met Bram and I said, hey, I'd like to power our conference application as well as our website off of this CMS just to prove that it's possible. So we're in the process of doing that as well. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff going there. But I guess the biggest inspiration on where I'd like to see an Angular CMS go, particularly in like the enterprise space, is something along the lines of Shopify, right? I don't know if you guys are all familiar with Shopify or have used it before. It's incredibly intuitive for the more the business type users. So like product owners, your success people, your GSAs, they would be able to get in and do very small things, uploading pictures, stuff that they probably need a lot of people doing at like NBA.com. But at the same time, the engineers can get in, switch to the liquid view, and be able to edit the templates themselves. And I think that's something that would be very interesting with an Angular implementation, in how do you modify those templates that are then part of the build process, the compilation process, and then be able to package that up in a nice bundle and deploy that to the cloud. So that's kind of the whole slew of things that I have in that Google Doc that I'd like to see if we could at least touch on a little bit, and maybe what you guys think on those.
My first question would be, it seems like you're trying to couple the CMS aspect of it and the view aspect of it, as opposed to detaching them completely from each other. Is that something that's plausible, or something you don't want to do?
I'm fine with them being decoupled, but one of the things that's nice, at least, about having them aware of each other. So I used to work at ADP, and we actually had a meta-driven framework that we could actually use a JSON object to dynamically configure the entire layout of the screen, as well as the binding to all the APIs. And we had a really cool drag and drop interface for building that as well. And the IDE itself was built off of the meta-driven framework. And it was really intriguing to me how quickly we could build things that way. And I think that by having them decoupled, but at the same time in the same technology, makes that a little bit easier to do. I may be completely wrong.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like, I wouldn't say you would want to maybe necessarily actually write your templates in the CMS, maybe necessarily, but in the Drupal world, you have blocks and you have panels and you have things like that where you can make highly customizable layouts.
Yep.
NBA.com is currently on paragraphs, right? And you can create all these extremely custom layouts with the paragraphs, but a developer would go in beforehand, write a little bit of PHP, write a little bit of Twig that kind of connects the paragraph up to the layout manager that you want to use. And then editorial can go in and just create totally brand new things that you never even thought of when you were a developer writing the code. So I would try to stay away from, like, one of the big issues with Drupal in the past was you could write HTML and CSS and PHP even right in Drupal, and then a lot of that would end up never getting into your build process. It would only exist in the database, and it just wasn't very good. So I would say try to stay away from that, but definitely layout management, theming, things like that, something that's really powerful is definitely going to be a strong use case, at least from what it sounds like for you. And I guess, are you looking at a pure node stack? Is that what you're kind of trying to do with universal on the back end, or
the lowest? So what I think a lot of the Google guys are leaning towards, right? So I'm also trying to strategically place the work that we put into scoping to be in the same direction that would get the most velocity out of the open source community and out of Google. And also I've seen a lot of stuff that B-Man's done, and I think that that's going in a very good direction, and especially with what Roy was saying around the WordPress stuff. With B-Man recently moved a lot of the Colmena stuff to use Lerna, and I think that the module system that uses and that allows us to use would really help building out the different modules that are part of the marketplace that WordPress has, and has been one of the really great things about the WordPress community.
With WordPress, you want to keep everything separate. The real benefit with using WordPress is just if you have the editorial team, let's say the people who are actually inputting the data, if you want to keep them completely separated out from the technology that is powering your node stack, and that is ultimately your website or your application, that's where I feel like WordPress really, in the enterprise realm and decoupled Angular front end, that's where the power really is. Whether it's WordPress or Drupal, really, it doesn't really matter. Just having a completely decoupled thing, that's what I'm kind of looking forward to, the whole CMS Angular, kind of put together.
So for me, one of the reasons to move towards Lerna was I was building out the NGATL backend with this platform, and I was just hooking into the same code all the time. So if I want to do an upgrade, you have to basically reapply all your changes again. I mean, you guys know the drill, don't have to explain it. But with this setup, it will basically allow me to create like a module, a conference module. It's completely standalone. I created some dynamic loading mechanism for Angular. It's not perfect, it breaks AOT, but hey, it works for now. And that really allows me to separate and move apart. So I can just go on with Colmena CMS, and if I want to upgrade the NGATL, I just basically rebase my code over it. As long as you don't touch the same areas, you don't have any conflicts. And I think that really allows for a flexible system. And you can allow people to just publish their own packages to NPM because it's just an NPM package. So that's where I hope we'll get some benefits over existing like more monolith systems.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, I'm honestly like not all too familiar with the CMS landscape in Node. The last time that I had looked, it looked like it hadn't really been super fleshed out. That was a long time ago. I know that systems like WordPress and Drupal, while they're not always the fastest systems, like the way that you can create content and tag it and organize it, and you get a lot of stuff for free, especially now that we've got some Symfony integration in with Drupal. So it seems like a lot of the problems have been solved there. Obviously that has some downsides to it. You don't have a consistent pure node stack in that case, or you have a little bit more complexity because you're still going to have back-end developers versus front-end developers. But, front-end code usually ends up being like, even front-end Node or front-end JavaScript ends up being a good bit different than your back-end Node. So CNN is on a Node stack, and like everybody is like, oh yeah, we're totally going to share our templates, on the front end and the back end. And it always just ends up like none of the templates ever end up getting shared. Like there's just like a little bit different data model with what you're working on the back end, or, just something kind of throws a wrench in the works. So I think I definitely see like the consistency there would be appealing, but I don't know that would be 100% consistent. You'd probably be able, same languages, right, which is huge. But I don't know that you'd be 100% consistent. It'd be a lot more consistent than like PHP and Node. But
I think you'd have to have a kind of intermediary. So between the data on the back end and then the templates on the front end, if you wanted it to be completely kind of agnostic to what's powering it, which we've kind of talked about GraphQL while we're at NGConf and stuff. And I feel like that's where the power of GraphQL is. Haven't used GraphQL for anything yet, but I don't know if anyone else has, but I feel like from what I've been reading about and things that I have seen, that's where a lot of the power in it is being able to kind of take whatever it is that you're getting in and then simplify it and standardize it so that all the templates are powered by or getting the same exact data type. So it might be worth looking into just for that alone.
Yeah, I actually just talked with Matthew Crutchfield at CNN, and they're looking at, and I think they're actually going to be deploying a GraphQL instance for some new Drupal sites that they're doing. And they're going to be using Fastly to cache the request body, use that as a cache key. So that seems promising. I still think that there's going to be a lot of cache misses with it, just because the front enders can post absolutely anything to it, right? But it does definitely seem alluring from the front end perspective to be able to make whatever data model you want. And when you have systems like ours where there's like, I think there's 15 to 20 different connected devices and iOS, Android, pretty much every, PS3, PS4, all that, having them be able to figure out their own data models and use whatever they want is huge. But we're just afraid of getting, that $100,000 AWS bill one month, like that's been kind of terrifying for us.
That's a really small bill.
Well, I won't say what we're currently spending, but we're actually doing really, really well for NBA.com in AWS right now, mainly because our Akamai edge caching has really gotten figured out. So most of the costs have kind of shifted towards that for us. But we have very few requests going back to our origin, which has been really nice.
Interesting. Bimo, you're pretty quiet.
Oh yeah, I like to listen. I don't want to put myself too far out there, but if you have to go with a split language stack, right? So you're going with PHP, MySQL on the back, Angular on the front. I would imagine you would want it to be as easy as possible and have to write the fewest amount of lines of code on the back end. I would imagine the last thing any JavaScript developer wants to do is still develop in PHP.
Yes. Well, and that's actually something that's interesting because we have another group at Career Builder that actually is on PHP right now. And granted, they did things in probably not the best way because they have like some convolution of logic a little bit, which I think happens a lot of times in pretty much every stack that you ever work in, that has the ability to go front to back, right? So trying to tease that apart now is a little bit of a challenge. And I think that that will be common without, I guess, the decoupling and the separation there. Yeah, I don't know. I get scared around a lot of the PHP stuff mostly because I'm not good at it. But it also just I don't know. It's just something about it. I'm much more comfortable with Node and TypeScript, and that the strong typing has really saved my behind quite a bit lately. And a lot of the Node stuff that we're doing now is actually Node with TypeScript. So we're sharing a lot more of the modules and a lot more of the classes that we're creating across the front and back end. And that's giving us a lot better consistency of our data models as well. And I think that could help benefit this a little bit.
I mean, the real benefit of kind of building something custom or using something more custom than that, kind of like what are the known CMSs out there, is that you can build a CMS for whoever it is that's actually inputting your data and your content. I find that, the sites that I work on and the kind of things that I do, it's more convenient to use something like WordPress because the people that we're hiring are just going to be more adapt to it. They've already probably going to have been using it for X amount of time. So they already know, like the only thing we have to teach them is how to use our certain plugins.
Roy's internet went out a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, my internet is being kind of weird. But just to say that, we use WordPress because it's easy for a lot of people to get up and running really quickly. And the only thing that they really have to learn is, our custom integrations with our custom plugins and what those screens look like and what that means. But, there's something to be said for it just being easier and flexibility-wise because WordPress is already out there. Same with Drupal. Drupal has been out there for so long. It's got a big community behind it. But you're kind of tackling it and making it fit your needs versus building something out of the box, or not taking something out of the box, but you're building something custom for your needs right now. And then that's like your CMS. The thing is, if you ever want to add to the CMS, it's a little bit more complex, right? It's not as simple as, hey, let's install a plugin. Hey, let's just create a simple plugin for this or a module. It's, hey, I need to like potentially do a lot of work, more work.
Yeah, using established CMSs, the boilerplate coding of what every CMS is going to use has already been not just written, but also vetted through, right? Like, I mean, for as long as WordPress and Drupal has been around, you can trust their user management system. Or you can go build your own, and best of luck with all the bugs.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the nice things about Drupal and Symfony, like, and even looking at kind of these forks, and this is why I wish Matt was here, but he wanted to bring up Contenta, which is an API first variant of Drupal, where now you can really have that hard separation between your front-end JavaScript people and your back-end PHP people. You know, you're just grinding out layouts and content, and everything is just being pushed out by Drupal in JSON form. And then you can rebuild all of that on the front end fairly easily, I think, with Contenta. Matt's much more familiar with it than I am, unfortunately. I want to go to an earlier comment. JavaScript people definitely don't want to write PHP. PHP people definitely don't want to write JavaScript too. So,
hey, no, I love them both. Actually, I think everyone in the world should just move to D3 and get over themselves.
Oh, my. Well, I went to one of our offices and they're writing Perl, so that was fun.
CNN, just a little nougaty history. CNN used to be one massive Frankenstein Perl script. It was
How many years ago?
I want to say maybe 18.
I was going to say less than one.
Well, some of that's still around, man. Like we were on CVS. I think we might still be on CVS for a few things. Like there's just, at a company as old as Turner, like just that cruft is just all over the place. But we're on XSLTs for a lot of stuff. Like for real, we're on XSLTs for some stuff. Do you guys even know what that is? Nobody knows it. Yeah, it's okay.
It sounds terrible.
No, it's awful. It's awful. But yeah,
I feel like there should be like a 2000 in that name, like XLT's 2000.
yeah. XLT 2000. Latest and greatest. I feel like I'm derailing us a little bit. Sorry, but like, I really think something like Contenta, like, you know, if some group wanted to get together and make a really great content management system in Node, and like something like that really existed, and it totally could. I haven't looked it up. Like,
he's on the call.
Oh, yes. Then like, yeah, you know, maybe use that, right? You know, Drupal and WordPress and really a lot of other CMSs, even something like Symfony gives you all the tools to kind of do all of that. You know, it'll give you user management and all that. Like just having something really strong in the CMS front is really important. I'm now looking at ghost.org/features.org. Just go ahead.
I've never used it, but this was the first full node stack CMS that I ever heard of. It's pretty much
And holy crap.
I'll put it in the doc.
Wasn't this a WordPress fork?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
The only downside I'm seeing to it though is I don't know if you can build your templates in anything other than handlebars. I don't know. I've never used it. I just know of it.
For me, I come from a background of PHP and Java, and I've worked Drupal, WordPress, etc. And the biggest gain to moving full stack JavaScript was more the mental switch that you don't have to make than actually code sharing. I mean, we do code sharing, but you build out your model and use them in two places. or you move some functionality from the back end to the front end. But not having to make the mental switch was great.
Well, so I'm curious, for your CMS that you're building out with Node, do you find, is your goal to make it as easy to use as something like WordPress? Like WordPress is, and I wouldn't even say Drupal, because Drupal, like you install it and you really don't get much out of the box. Like you get some, but WordPress, you really get a site in like 5 minutes. You can get up and running.
I wanted to be able to get up and running in 5 minutes. So I just wrote it down, like the goal, start building your app or extending your API in 5 minutes. Like install it, getting up and running. So you have to have a steady basis. But I would actually love to be more towards Drupal in terms of having extensibility. And for instance, the concept of distributions. Because what I do with CMS might work for me. I want to have events, products, and pages. But Zack wants to have events, speakers, locations, etc. And I would love the idea of having distributions. Or for instance, that you say, you know what, your events model is nice, but I need property X. So you can just take my code, duplicate it, publish your changes on like a private registry or an NPM, and go with that.
Well,
because that's where the personal need mostly is. And yeah, I think the management, like the editing interface should be polished. But for me, it's not the priority. I would love to get it the same experience as WordPress, that I can basically tell my mom how to do it, and she could. That's probably more WordPress than Drupal. I mean, Drupal is not that system. I didn't see Drupal 8, but up until 7 it wasn't. But I at this point, I'm going to focus on being like extensible platform. See what that brings us. Not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, with the extensibility part, you know, if it gets to the point where companies like Stripe and Tito it can start writing modules for just the same way that happens with WordPress, right? So, you know, MailChimp, all those guys should be able to write modules, kind of like how Spinnaker is, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Spinnaker, but for deployment pipeline stuff, but they didn't write the module for deploying to GCP or AWS or Azure. Those guys wrote that themselves because they're the experts in that. And then they just followed the contract that Spinnaker put in place on here's how you get to show up in the menu. Here's how you hook into the data stores and all that stuff. So I think that's kind of what B-Man's working towards. And I know that's the same model that WordPress and Drupal follow to an extent. So I think that pattern is very good. It's just how do you get there, and what do you tackle first?
And what's the point? I mean, like, if your content management system is building out an app, right? If you have a CMS, the C of CMS is content. So being able to create content easily, as well as from like the arguments, or not really the arguments, the discussions I've had in the WordPress community, when I talk about, using Angular on the front end, it's usually when I'm talking about something that's not SEO in mind, right? Like something that's kind of a unique UI feature, things like that. But I mean, that's kind of shifting nowadays. So I think it just depends on what your use case is for your application as a whole. And if people are going to move to Node for applications that are going to be focused on, with SEO in mind, basically. Like right now, I look at Node as these kind of applications, and then they'll have, non-Node marketing pages, right? Like sometimes I've even seen whole applications built in Node, and then their marketing site, the actual like homepage and things like that, are built in Drupal or WordPress, because they're usually two different teams sometimes. Who's building the marketing site, who's building the actual application. So I don't know, it's interesting. And I think if there was a good solid use case or a solid example of, I think Angular Universal might do this, where it's an SEO friendly front end.
Yep.
Then we're going to see CMSs kind of come in more and more into play. And you're going to find hopefully people using, maybe even adopting more, taking away from the market share of Drupal and WordPress. Again, migrating completely into Node.
Yep. Yeah, and that's actually something we've actively been doing at Career Builder, is migrating to Universal for our sites that do require SEO. So our China team was were the first teams to move to Angular 4 in the org, and their performance numbers were fantastic. And of course, page paint and first byte and all that stuff helps a lot with SEO. But also with Universal doing 100% server-side rendering really helps with the crawlability of it, right? So that you definitely towards the Universal side. And if I remember right, that was one of the things that we wanted to do with our integration with Colmena, or whatever we end up doing, and because that SEO is incredibly important to a lot of enterprise sites, right? So a lot of enterprises are really worried about that, and whatever solution we end up doing has to make sure that that's in mind.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's like we obviously care about SEO, but most of what we're using Angular for is like very temporary type game data or things like that. I think for us, and plus, like Google is going to be rendering your JavaScript, and once you take, consider how much traffic Google is throwing us versus all the other search engines combined.
Right.
I think Google's in like the high 90s for us, and from what I've seen, they're processing and crawling pretty much all the JavaScript that we're generating. So they're doing a good job. I think for us, that performance benefit is the most appealing, right? Like right now, we're looking at Dockerizing our Angular 4 instance or our Angular 4 code, and then doing a whole bunch of routing on the separate Docker app. That's just Angular Universal, spitting out components, right?
Yep.
And then on the main Drupal site, we just use ESIs to pull in those components and get compiled at the edge. And then we'd have that really fast loading, like 10-second updating data in there, right? And then it would get updated by Angular every single time after that. So I think like that's the really exciting thing for us, really being able to get that time to first byte and paint.
So you're pushing towards using Angular Universal for a specific component versus a whole application?
Yeah, like we're gonna pull in the components. So right now we have our game detail pages, right? So there's a scoreboard on the left. It's got all the games that are currently being played in it, right? The problem is, it's dependent on 4 or 5 different feeds, and we don't have something like GraphQL set up yet. And all of that kind of has to wait until some images in the header load because they're not being correctly lazy loaded because somebody just threw them on there. And so like it takes a little while for that scoreboard to come in, right? But if we did something with Angular Universal, and that's a root component on the left, if we did something with Angular Universal, we could pull that scoreboard in almost immediately. And then while Angular and everything is spinning up, the user would see at least something. And then Angular would blow it away and load its HTML into the component. So I think that's a interesting use case, at least for us. We don't really do this whole single page app thing. We're all, like root component here, root component over here, another root component in the header, just kind of spread out everywhere, right? So being able to take like just that one component and output it in different places with an ESI would be a good use case for us.
We'll have to have a site.
Start again.
Yeah. It reminds me of like portals and like iframes and oh gosh.
I mean, I wouldn't go so far as saying like it's ESI, right? So like it's being compiled at the edge, right? Like it's not like the load isn't going to be on our systems through like an SSI or something like that to pull it in. And Akamai can really handle that compilation of the page all by itself. So it won't bust the cache on the whole page, right? That'll have like a 2-minute cache time on it. For those components that it's pulling in the ESI, those will have like 10-second cache times on them. And each time the user comes in, it'll go back to those specific components in our Dockerized instance once, and then refresh just that part and never go back to Drupal to refresh anything on that page, at least for 2 minutes. And ideally, we leave rid of all the TTL-based stuff, right? Like, we want to get integrated with Drupal's cache tags, with Akamai's cache tags, and be able to forward and validate everything as we're going through. We're not quite there yet, but I think all of that would be really interesting to do.
I had the question at the tip of my tongue. Has there been a use case or already proven use case for doing what you want to do? I've heard of Angular Universal. I've never heard of using it to render server-side, then still attacking it with Angular to be a client-side thing thereafter. Is that like something that's commonly done, or something you guys are just testing out?
Is partial rendering a normal thing with Angular Universal?
I have no idea. We're gonna jump in and test it out, because I think we'll have to have that component rendered out at a specific route in the app, right? And it would just have to be like, for this route, just this component gets printed out. So I think we can do that. It's gonna take some more investigation on our side, but we do have everything set up to where it's, sorry, I just got distracted. We do have it set up to where we do have components being output at specific routes, and everything is kind of like a root level component. So I think it's definitely possible. We just have to.
Well, I mean, like, can you have a scoreboard render server side and then have Angular come in and still make it client side kind of modified?
Yeah, you could do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I haven't played with Universal at all yet. I need to get into it.
Yeah, so there's two different ways to do it. So there's one method. I'm probably going to name these wrong. One of the methods will actually fetch the initial state of the data for you, and then move that state from the server side rendering to the client side, so that this client side is also aware of that state and then can do whatever it needs to do to continue refreshing that state. And there's also something else that will, as the page is loading, because it was server-side rendering and the client's not aware of the state yet, it will actually record all of the events that, like, if you click on something, and then the moment the page is bootstrapped and says it's ready, it will replay those events so you don't lose your clicks and anything that you might have been trying to do. So that helps too quite a bit. In the transition of the state from server side to client side.
You're probably referring to pre-boot, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
I haven't dug into it. This is really awesome. I need to start looking into it more. Is that something that, again, you want to integrate into your Node CMS?
That would be on the front end side of it.
Yeah, but could you build a package solution where it was, hey, do you want to get everything up and going with Node and Angular to have, BMan CMS with Angular Universal, with all of that kind of put together as one package? Because then you're really up and running. You could get up and running really quickly with something that's super performant.
Yep. I wonder what the Lighthouse score would be on that.
So currently for the CMS, it's server-side rendering, because and if somebody wants to do it, he can do it in his branch, and obviously I'm happy to review it. For the websites, obviously it's a different story. Most likely at least a homepage or some designated pages, or even everything. should be working with stuff like pre-built. And I'm having some branches with, for instance, a demo website, so that everything that's in Colmena is also available. That you at least have an Angular 4 base website that you can just take and customize. Same goes for a basic Ionic app. With the mono repo structure, it's going to be super easy to just like pick one of the side projects.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting to have that as like the predefined bootstrap front end, because I think what Roy's getting at is a really good point. I mean, if that's there, the barrier to entry to leveraging any CMS is already gone, right? Here's the entire setup, and heck, if it comes as a Docker container, that's even better.
For sure, and I mean it should. And I'm going to work full time on this stuff. I'm privileged to have the opportunity to do this for the next couple of months, and I really want to get this going. But also as a platform for my own needs. I have some own projects that I want to build, and I continuously come back to, I need some sort of base platform that just works, that does X, Y, and Z for me out of the box. Doesn't have to think about it, because you're rewriting the same app all the time generally. So it's a personal need first, and then the use case for NGATL and maybe even career builder. Yeah, that's also opportunities to even look, like get a broader picture.
Yeah, so the conference is throwing some money at it a little bit too, as we get money to be able to help drive our app and stuff too. So that use case is also coming in, because something else that's important is, you know, I hate having to put the same stuff in multiple places, right? So if I'm publishing content, I should be publishing content in one place and not 5. And be able to decide, do I want this to also go to my mobile platform? Do I just want this to go to my web platform? And I think that's a very common use case that I think this will easily solve.
Startup I was working for previously, we had a bunch of clients that were in Drupal. So the guys I worked with were from a Drupal shop, and we actually had an integration. We just built a Drupal module, and we just fed our data into that system. So then Drupal is becoming the more or less dumb front end for editing. We had our Angular experience, which was like a really lean experience. You could just click page edit it. That was the only thing you could do, which served the purpose. And it was on the mobile app and on the Drupal website directly. But obviously the next guy want to have it the other way around. He says like, yeah, your CMS is nice, but I want to work in Drupal, push it out there. There's no reason why that shouldn't work. Shouldn't be able to get it work.
No, I totally agree with Zach. I think content should be only created in one place, but the view or the window of the content should be anything, and it should be, like, in my mind, it should be decoupled. Like I get the whole node stack CMS, as long as there's still a decoupling point where if you want something else to manage the content or look at the content and read it, they still can, completely decoupled. But that's what WordPress is moving towards. Like there's plugins which create native apps nowadays, which are, again, you're creating a completely decoupled phone experience for your website, just reading off of the API data. And the only reason I also brought up GraphQL earlier, and I have it in the document, which I'll link to people who are watching maybe later, is if you have multiple sites. Like, I know it's not your use case, but a good example might be if I'm creating a website where I want all NBA data, and there's NBA.com, but then for my company, I have ESPN.com, and that also has NBA data that might be different. Being able to grab those two together and then show it off in one template, basically.
You're thinking that. I was like, that sounds like the opposite of what I'm trying to do, which is like I want one data store, and so like if you think about like a lot of enterprises, they also have like customer segmented data. So like I was thinking, oh, that's cool. I could have one data store and then segment based on the authorization and authentication context of the user and the site, and be able to segment the data that way. And you're talking about the other direction, funneling in from multiple. Back?
Yeah. My internet's super screwy. But yeah, no, that's what that's what we were talking about. That's what I've been kind of thinking about for the past few weeks, especially when you're talking about completely being agnostic, right? So having Brian's website in Drupal and my website in WordPress, but being able to have an Angular front end that's showing off the data, not caring where it comes from, not caring where the editors put in or what application they were using. That way, you could have a CMS cater to every team that needs to add content, right? So like if every team needed a unique UX experience for the content they edit or they enter, then you could give that to them maybe with a Node CMS being a little more extendable, but still have one front end that still kind of brings all that data together and funnels it.
Yeah. And I actually, Beeman, I think that's kind of interesting because with the loopback stuff that you're doing, I think that you could kind of serve as also as a proxy layer for organizations migrating from one or trying to maintain both as well. Because I know that is something that's interesting about loopback, because you could build those kind of connectors to mutate that data as it comes through the CMS. So
Loopback supports multiple data sources. One of them is, for instance, the REST data source, where I can just define like, this is my REST endpoint and this is the operations I want to allow, or even SOAP if you're still in the XSLT XML world. Work. We actually did it. We did it successfully. We had like clients on, I think, exact targets, and we had like 3 accounts of exact target we needed to manage. We basically hot switched the connections. So for one client, we had one set of credentials, for the other one, the others. When the result goes out, when the request goes out to exact target, you just grab the credentials that you need, make the request, and the next one's doing the next request. It works perfectly fine. It's more or less like a transparent data source, which is really powerful because in your front end or in your
you have a consistent contract.
It's just a contract you adhere to, and in your code you don't even care like what's the data source. It can be in memory, MySQL. We've had Elasticsearch, Mongo, and I think even Postgres connected at the same time, same API. And you can switch them out freely. I built a search engine in Loopback, just like manually hacked it together. It wasn't performant. I backed it by Elasticsearch, and then poof, obviously it wasn't performant as of that point. So I think that's a very nice abstraction. And for me, Node backend at this point equals Loopback more or less. I mean, I never built it from scratch. I tried it, but I've always got back to Loopback. I obviously want to look into GraphQL, but those most likely, in my case, will be backed by REST data sources provided by Loopback at this point.
Yeah. Well, and I was funny because I was looking at there's an NPM module for Loopback GraphQL. I'm just like, hey, they're already put together.
Yeah. So that's definitely something I need to look into, and I want to have like a broad example of what you can do with Colmena CMS, and I don't want to force anything too specific, because most likely it won't apply to the person using it. And I think it's better to give a broad example of how you could use it. Things I learned from building my own apps and my own platforms, and get that into there. But anyway, I'm really open to any. I don't have any fixed direction, so if anybody has a good idea or sees that I'm doing bad practices anytime, I'm more than happy to look at it.
Well, I'm going to channel Matt Davis for a second. So we've talked a lot about GraphQL, but anybody been working with JSON API or seen any value in that? JSON API, it's a good bit easier to cache. You still have endpoints. You can control some of what gets returned with query parameters, but it seems to use HTTP less as a dumb pipe like GraphQL does, and really allows you to get all the caching that you can out of it.
You're not talking about a RESTful API, right? That just returns JSON.
No, this is a JSON API, not RESTful. Yeah. Here, let me link to it just so you all don't think I'm crazy.
Bimo just dropped it.
Already a link. Bimo's silent, but he's on it.
Yeah, JSON API.
Building small, right?
But I mean, check it out. I'm just channeling my Matt Davis. Oh, you already got it. But yeah, I'm just channeling Matt Davis because he would say like, "Hey, JSON API, it's pretty cool." Whenever we talk about GraphQL, so there's actually a Drupal module for JSON API that will start outputting all of your content types and everything like that in a very consistent way. And I know we're getting close on time. Sorry. But
Bimo,
The big benefit of using GraphQL is like to have the front end dev, whether it's the same person or not, like grab the data dynamically. And this is something that you can do, like it's what Loopback uses as well. So you define your relationships and you can just say, okay, I want to have a user and I want to have his nodes and I want to have his events and whatever. You can do that quite deep. The syntax is not as pretty as GraphQL, so you're in the structure, but it's a similar kind of thing. And I've been thinking that that's very powerful because in my Angular apps, you just basically define the structure that you want to get back, and the API provide it if it can provide it.
Yeah, some of the most powerful things are when you don't have to code how it works, but just what it is.
Right, more declarative way.
Yes, that's what I've been playing with the WordPress REST API in this framework, is doing actual data models by just filling out that JSON array, just an object of this is what it is, this is what the parameters should be, and then the framework itself builds all of the CRUD endpoints and does the proper association. So if you have a cat and you have 6 cats and 1 owner, it pieces it all together. That's been a lot of fun, but that's definitely how you get more involvement without just like people glazing straight over about like how do I do all of the promises and connect the data in Node when all I know is I have a cat and it's a tiger cat and it weighs 500 pounds.
yeah, as a front ender, I definitely love the idea, and even with all the connected devices and everything that we have to support, like I love the idea of GraphQL, but the DevOps guy in me is like, what is my AWS bill going to look like? Because it's all going to be largely uncacheable, going back to origin, busting through. You can help mitigate some of that, right? But, usually something like JSON API is just going to be a lot more highly cacheable. It's not going to give you anywhere near the flexibility. And I'm not trying to say it will, but I wonder if it can give you at least enough to make the front enders not chase me around the office with pitchforks and torches, I guess there's just caveats, right?
Before we all jump out, another good thing that I want to advocate for WordPress is the how discoverable the API is. So you can build out an entire, everything that every endpoint in your entire REST API for that site can do, you can hit one endpoint and know all of that. And you can script it out so that, like I have a tiny little Angular service that hits it and maps every Git push posts, like every HTTP verb to an actual function of that object. So whenever I script out the rest of the site, I don't have to remember how to do HTTP calls. I just say like API client post Git. Done.
Crazy.
Yeah, no, the WordPress REST API is super discoverable. I actually did a series with a friend of mine on just how discoverable it is. It's pretty cool. I was going to say the JSON API that you guys linked to looks eerily similar to what spits out for the REST API as well. So it's interesting. It's interesting just dealing with I don't know, what we're kind of talking about here and all the CMSs that are kind of available to enterprise. And I'm hoping that enterprise start adopting more. It's kind of weird being in the WordPress realm and the Angular realm because I feel like enterprise hates me on both levels right now. And So I'm
looking for the wrong enterprises.
So
I'm telling you, get into D3.
So it's just trying to figure out how to best.
So I would love to see. I'd love to see if we get some, one or two clear action items out of this too. See what we're going to work on next, or what we'd like to do to kind of see if how to push this forward. So does anybody have any like action items that they would like to take on, or any action items that they'd like to see?
I don't know.
I feel like we're all working on different things. I would like to see, what B-Man is kind of working on. So I really wanted to spend the time to look at it. I'm not sure if there's one thing that we could all work on together, because it feels like we're all working on different things. But at the same time, I feel like we're all fighting the same fight, so to speak. Like we're all in the same war, but fighting different battles. Right. So
what I might be able to do is prepare some kind of presentation where I go through the platform. Just make it like a 20-minute presentation that I can give in the same setup like this. We can record, and then I can just go over the platform, answer your questions, and show what it can do, design choices I made. If that's interesting, I'd be happy to prepare that for next meeting, or even record it. You can just record the screen part. Other than that, I have a Slack, and you're all welcome to join Slack, and I'm on there most of my days when I'm working.
I think having a demo and a walkthrough, and then also a forum to ask questions, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe next time we meet, I don't know if it'll be next week or whenever, but maybe we can focus on your CMS, and then maybe BMO and I can kind of figure out a demo, same thing, with WordPress, and Brian can figure out something with Drupal. That'd be kind of a cool little thing that we can do.
I'm gonna go ahead.
Good luck with that, Brian.
I'm gonna, since Matt isn't here, I'm gonna sign him up for some work. I'm gonna go ahead and commit Matt a hard commit to presenting Contenta with Angular, which is the Drupal API variant.
So is it Drupal without a backend, or without an admin interface?
Think of it as just like API first. So everything has a data model for it. Like right now, it's next to impossible do forms, on the admin pages, because you don't have the validation hooks. They're only existing in PHP. So it's just But an admin UI still exists. I'd honestly have to check it. He might have to build it. like the data's there, but by next week, since I just committed him to this, he might have to build it.
He might just build a connector to Colmena.
Yeah. I know that he's going up to Mountain View to talk with the Angular guys later, and he wants to have something done by then. So
when is he doing that?
I don't know the exact date.
Okay. Yeah, because it would be good if we had Rob on this call when BMan and BMO and everyone's BMO and Roy are doing the demos. I think that would be helpful because I'm sure he has some insights into the inner workings of what the Angular team's working on as well.
We might be able to get Steven.
Steven Fluid?
Yeah.
Yeah. He wanted to come too, but I think he's on a trip right now.
Okay. Yeah. Usually he's pretty available. But yeah, we might be able to grab him one of these times.
Cool. I mean, if we're down, I'm happy to make this a thing. I'm happy to keep on using this account. So let's just play by ear for now. But it sounds like a cool actionable item for all of us, and kind of having a demo thing and showing off what CMSs can do with Angular would be pretty cool. I've built a few things already with WordPress, kind of both in the WordPress ecosystem and kind of decoupled outside of it. Plus, BMO's done some cool stuff too with WordPress and the API. So cool, guys. I think we'll call it there. Thank you for joining us. Zach, thanks for putting it all together.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
And I guess we'll just be in touch, and can we just kind of plan for next week? And if things come up, just let us know.
That sounds fantastic.
Cool. Cool. Well, then I'll see you guys all next week.
Sweet.
Cool.
Talk to you later.